Hey everyone, welcome to the video about the context for Shakespeare's sonnets. Let's see. Okay, so now we're going to be coming back to that figure of Henry Wriothesley, who I mentioned earlier in the materials video. This question of who do the sonnets address often comes up when we're talking about Shakespeare's sonnets. There are 154 sonnets in his collection of sonnets. And I think the popular perception is that all of the sonnets are love poems, which isn't really true, and all of the poems are written to a female beloved. That's definitely not true. In fact, the vast majority of the sonnets, sonnets 1 through 126, were written to a beloved young man, and it was only the final 25, or I'm bad at math on the fly, only final 25 or 30 or so that were written to a female, sometimes referred to as the Dark Lady. You may have heard of that figure before. And the fact that these sonnets are primarily addressed to a man, and only a few of them are addressed to a lady, raises important questions about Shakespeare as a person and as an author. One question you may have heard in other contexts is, was Shakespeare queer? Or was Shakespeare gay? This is a somewhat complicated question because in the Renaissance, they did not have the words queer or gay or straight, at least when it's referring to sexuality. They didn't have the word sexuality, they didn't have the word heterosexuality, they didn't have the word homosexuality. So all of our modern language for sexual identity was not really part of the early modern period. So some scholars have cautioned against imputing our modern sexual categories onto the early modern period, and yet there were all kinds of other words for different kinds of sexuality in the period. You may have heard of the word sodomy before. That was a current word in the Renaissance to refer to what we would now call, I suppose, homosexual acts, as well as a number of other things. Even just being a heretic in the period could be labeled sodomy. There are also words like catamite or Ganymede or ingle or tribid, all of which were essentially Renaissance versions of calling someone gay or a lesbian in the period. So we have that little history lesson there about past sexualities. Now we're back to this question about, was Shakespeare queer, considering he wrote 126 of his sonnets to a young man, and many of them are love poems. Well, scholars have many different answers to this question, and I just wanted to provide you with one person's take on this. I'm not going to read this entire quotation. You can pause the video and do that if you'd like to. But I will start here. And of the series of 154 sonnets, it has to be noted that the first 126 sonnets are all addressed to a man, to the master mistress of his passion. But I think there's an extraordinary tenderness in Shakespeare when he describes the love of one man for another, and it comes in surprising places. So this figure seems convicted that Shakespeare is in fact expressing a kind of queer love, or even a queer identity in these poems. Or at the very least, we could say he's creating a queer character or a queer persona in his sonnets who is exploring same-sex love. We're not done with Shakespeare and his queerness, because that will come back when we read one of his plays in a few weeks. So we'll definitely be revisiting this question. And if you're still interested in learning more about this, you can go to the optional reading I posted this week labeled, Was Shakespeare Gay? All right, that's all I have for the context video. I will see you over at the themes video next.